You feeling excited?
Yeah.
Feeling energized?
Yeah.
Especially after that orchestra, so I have to admit, I actually quit playing piano and violin, both of them, when I was 7 years old, because my amazing mom admitted that I had absolutely no talent in either of those. But more importantly, she realized that I had significantly more talent in something that I genuinely enjoyed doing, which was writing. So, cheers to moms and dads for letting their daughters and sons quit instruments when necessary. Okay, that was really not where I was going with that. The point is that I had parents who were incredibly aware of what my passions were and willing to embrace that. And I'm incredibly grateful. That's why I'm standing here today. Now, I think it's also awesome that we have 4 guys in the room, I guess, because what I'm going to be talking about is definitely applicable not just to girls but also to guys, because I think that when we talk about women's rights and what girls can be doing in the 21st century, we definitely need to realize that your dads and your boyfriends and your brothers can be really important parts of that conversation as well. So I hope that you're going to go back to your schools and your classrooms and hang out with your friends with that attitude as well. That what happened in this room, although it's mostly girls, doesn't just stay with girls. It has huge and even worldwide importance. But I'm going to start with something else. First of all, I want to know, what are a couple of your favorite Beyonce songs? Let's hit this group first. Okay, let's get 3 favorites. 3 favorites. Irreplaceable, Love. Okay, great. What about this group? Okay. And what about this group? Anything else? Everyone loves this. Okay. Is anyone here flawless? Yep, I'm seeing some people. Okay. Now, I want to hear you respond, since we seem to have some pretty devout Beyonce fans in the audience. There's this line you should recognize. So, I want you to say the answer when I ask this question. Who rule the world?
Girls.
A little louder?
Girls.
A little louder?
Girls.
Okay, we have some spirit in this room. I'm liking how loud we can get. Great. I knew your potential after I was in that orchestra. Like, I realized your vocal cords are able to do more. The thing is that I have expectations. Like, the thing is that I'm a huge fan of Beyonce as well, and I listen to this song. And then I went online and I read an article that Beyonce had written, and this was a couple months ago, on the Shriver Report. So, as in former First Lady Maria Shriver has this website, which is awesome, and it has all kinds of articles about women in work, women in government, women in men, all kinds of issues. And she talks a lot about economic equality, a lot of very important issues when it comes to women and girls. And I read an article written by Beyonce, and it was called Why Gender Equality is a Myth. And after listening to a song that says, Who Rule the World? Girls, then I definitely felt a little bit cheated. I was like, okay, so it turns out we don't actually rule the world yet. And that's when I started thinking about why it's so important to realize that injustices do exist in our economy, in media, and in society. They exist when we walk down the street and get catcalled when we don't want to hear anything about our appearance or the way we're walking. They happen when we're watching the nightly news and an advertisement comes on that clearly portrays women in a way that is derogatory or that is specific only to how someone dresses or how someone looks, basically, instead of what they can do and what's up here. And these are things that we see and that we often ignore, that we pay little attention to. When it comes to injustices, regardless of who they affect, it's often difficult to point them out. Sometimes we worry that we're going to be that one girl or that one guy who is saying that's sexist or that's racist, and everyone will be like, oh, you're just being too sensitive. It isn't always fun, it isn't always comfortable, and it isn't always easy to spot when things that are wrong are happening in the world. But it is 100% necessary. Because what happens when we tell ourselves that a baby girl born today has exactly the same opportunities as any baby boy is we cheat ourselves of the opportunity to solve the problems that exist. And I will tell you that it is significantly more fun and significantly more empowering and significantly more important to be able to solve problems instead of ignoring them. So that's what I want to challenge you all here today to do. I have a challenge for you. I want you to say the F word. Yes, feminism. So, feminism might not be as bad as what you might have been thinking of when I heard small, it takes a breath in that audience, but it has gotten a bad rap. I remember one time I got into a debate with a friend about the Lilly Ledbetter Equal Pay Act. I know, super nerdy. And this is what I do on my weekends, you know. Okay, not really, but occasionally. I was debating and I said, like, a bunch of things about how women deserve equal pay, basically, because it was very, very obvious to me. And my friend looks at me and says, kind of derisively, "You're a feminist, aren't you?" And this has happened to many, many people, and responses may vary, but in my case, I was proud to respond, yes, I am. Do you have a problem with that? A defining moment for me was when we were asked to introduce ourselves on the first day of class at summer camp, and I was studying a philosophy course at Stanford, and so it was pretty fun. We talked about all kinds of issues of morality and ethics, but before that started, we had an icebreaker session. So who here has ever been to a summer camp thing? Seeing some people have been to summer camp. Okay, so you know those icebreakers that are really cheesy, like where you go around and you, I don't know, do an improv or you say something about yourself that's weird. We had a really standard one. We were just supposed to say one thing that other people might not know. So people said, oh, I write for the school newspaper, I play soccer, whatever else you might say in an introductory type thing. And I said, looking around the room at all these different people I didn't know, I'm a feminist. And my convictions didn't start with finding a way to introduce myself at summer camp. They started gradually and in some unlikely places. So who here liked princesses and princess stories growing up? Seeing some raised hands? Okay, a lot of people. Well, I loved princesses. I wanted to be a princess. I didn't realize that was a really hard job to get. I loved how fancy their tiaras were and how elaborate their dresses were, and basically everything about them, their convoluted names and how they just inherited power. Okay, maybe that's not the type of thing everyone thinks about, but this could have easily gone in the other direction for me. Too much thinking about princesses getting rescued by Prince Charmings could have made me wait for my very own Prince Charming on a white horse to ride up. Or it could have made me buy into an image of women or of feminine as weak, except for the fact that I loved history too. So the princesses that I loved weren't all princesses that came straight out of a Disney storybook. In the pages of books, I did find my role models and I did find princesses, maybe just not the ones that everyone would expect. When I was 8 years old, I started reading about King Henry VIII, so now I'm seeing some faces like, is this going to turn into a history lesson? But King Henry VIII is an interesting fellow. He had many wives, and he also had a daughter named Elizabeth I. So anyone here is probably familiar with that name because of history class and seeing some nodded heads. So Elizabeth I had a really tough childhood. I mean, once her sister, Queen Mary, came to power, then they didn't have the greatest of relationships. If you think you have a bad relationship with your siblings, try letting them put you in prison for a short period of time. So she had to overcome all these obstacles. And I found her to be so much cooler than Cinderella, because being imprisoned in the Tower of London with the threat of execution hanging over your head is an obstacle that seems a whole lot bigger than trying to find your prince or throwing down a glass slipper. Like most monarchs, obviously, she was not perfect, but she did a lot of cool things. Like for years and years, she resisted all these advisors who told her, hey, we have this problem, lady. Women can't rule, so you should probably find a husband and like have a kid at some point, because that's what you're supposed to do. And she was all, I'm not going to do that, and managed to rule successfully, becoming an epic role model for single ladies. Second Beyonce reference of the day, I'm on a roll everywhere. And in 1588, she famously rode among British troops who were about to challenge the Spanish Armada threatening their homeland, and she delivered a motivational speech that is still quoted today, saying, I am come amongst you at this time, not for my recreation or sport, but being resolved in the midst and heat of battle, to live or die amongst you all, to lay down for my God and for my kingdom and for my people, my honor and my blood, even the dust. How epic is that? So these were the princesses I grew up with, in part. The lesson that being a bookworm taught me was that for every single gorgeous Snow White or Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, there was a Catherine the Great or Joan of Arc or Eleanor Roosevelt. And so when I started writing my own stories, I determined there had to be some main characters who weren't perfect good little girls, that didn't necessarily follow all the rules and stay indoors and look pretty 100% of the time. One of my stories, to give a quick recap, there was a main character named Gwendolyn. She was a little bit of a tomboy, and she basically enjoyed doing a bunch of things that girls weren't supposed to. She decided, for whatever reason, to run away and adventure throughout the kingdom. This is my 7-year-old self speaking, so I think there were repressed desires, things that I wanted to do, like adventure everywhere. And when she came back, then she realized there were soldiers threatening her hometown, and she was like, I have to fix this. So she snuck behind enemy lines and poisoned a bunch of grapefruits that the enemy soldiers were about to eat with laxatives. Again, 7-year-old mind. Clearly their explosive diarrhea rendered them unable to fight the next day. Hometown saved. Girl, sneaking behind enemy lines? Poisoning enemy soldiers with laxatives? Explosive diarrhea? How many times do you hear those words in the same sentence? That came really naturally to me, not just because I was a little kid who was in my growth phase, but also because that was around the same time I decided unashamedly that I was a feminist. But I wonder, because I came to it so early, why those 3 little words, not I love you, but I'm a feminist, are so hard for girls and guys to say. What I mean is that when I do hear people say they're feminists, it's often followed by some sort of apology or a qualifier. Maybe I'm that person who says, I'm a feminist, but I still like it when guys pay for dinner. Or, I'm a feminist when it comes to basic rights and stuff, but I don't know about the other things. Or maybe I'm that person who says, I wouldn't call myself a feminist, but I am all for women's rights and equality and equal access to healthcare and a bunch of other things. Raise your hand if you've ever said something like that or ever heard someone you know say something like that. Seeing a lot of raised hands. Okay, so the crazy thing is that if you're that person who says, I'm a feminist, but, or I'm a feminist when it comes to one issue, or even that person who says, I wouldn't call myself a feminist, but, I'm willing to bet that you probably are. You see, when people imagine feminist, there's often an image that comes to mind, and it's not a very pleasant image. I've talked to my friends and they say, well, I think of this kind of scary lady from the 1960s who's like wearing gigantic shoulder pads and a pantsuit. It freaks me out a little bit. I can imagine if I were up on stage and I were like really scary looking, I think that would be a bad thing. But the thing is that feminists aren't scary, shoulder-padded, man-hating ladies who want to completely, I don't know, change the world in a bad way or something. I'm surprised that people get to that definition because the actual definition of feminism is something that is pretty simple. Who here has a smartphone on them? See some raised hands? Okay, so if you have a smartphone, I want you to pull it out. Okay. Go to Google, assuming you have data or Wi-Fi. I don't actually, so I have to stand there. So who's on Google? Right, great. So in Google, I want you to type in define feminism. So just raise your hand once you finish typing in define feminism and enter. Awesome. Okay, so the dictionary definition, for those of you who don't have your phones open right now, according to Google, feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. Simple, right? Raise your hand if you think you deserve to earn as much as any man. Awesome. Raise your hand if you think that you deserve the right to vote and to be equally represented in politics. Seeing a lot of raised hands. Awesome. Raise your hand if you never want to hear someone say, you can't do blank because you're a girl, you throw like a girl, or you... Okay, I'm seeing a lot of raised hands for that one. That is social equality, that is economic equality, that is political equality. Every single one of you who just raised your hands for those 3 things, you're saying you're a feminist. I think we should be less surprised when people declare that they are feminists and more surprised when they say they aren't. Because quite honestly, it is the 21st century, and if you do not believe that women should have political, social, and economic equality, I don't know where you just came from. Feminists are men, feminists are women, feminists are little kids. And I realized something when I was working on this speech, which is that I think every single one of us is born feminist. When we are babies, we don't say, I deserve to, or baby boys don't say, I deserve to make more money because I'm a guy. For one thing, they can't really talk. But baby girls don't take out their pacifiers because they're worried about not looking cute enough in the selfie they're taking, or they want to look adorable for that cute baby boy over there. Okay, that'd be a little bit disturbing, let's be honest, if babies talked and did all that. But the thing is that I want to keep that quality. I want to keep that quality where we don't think about our gender as being a limitation on us or in any way making us bad or less deserving. We shouldn't lose that, and we should never feel like we have to qualify, deny, or apologize for our belief in what's right, equality. There's a great Nigerian writer, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who delivered a TED Talk entitled Why We Should All Be Feminists. And maybe some of you, if you heard Flawless, heard this quote from her, which Beyonce inserted in the song. She said, "We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, you can have ambition, but not too much. You should aim to be successful, but not too successful, otherwise you would threaten the man." And when I first heard that, then I recoiled. I thought, I don't shrink, I don't do that. But then I realized, even I, as someone who was raised in a household where my parents told me to reach for the sky and do everything as well and as strongly as any boy, and even better, I realized that I do that sometimes. I shrink in my seat. I don't raise my hand because I'm scared. When I'm in class, I don't want people to think I'm stupid. When I'm in my computer science and engineering class, I feel self-conscious about being one of only 4 girls, and I think, oh, I don't want to be bad at this project because what if someone says it's because she's a girl? I definitely have those thoughts, even as a feminist, even as someone who knows that I can do things capably. So if we find ourselves doing this, we have to make a conscious effort to stop. If I'm sitting in the classroom and I have a question or I have a comment, and I'm doing this. You know that feeling where you're just kind of like deciding and you're like just barely there? And I want you to do this. Maybe not the standing up part, but you know. Because I see guys do this. Like, what I have to say is worthwhile. What I have to say is something everyone should hear. And I want everybody to go from this to this. You want to raise your hands in the air right now? Put those hands in the air. Okay. Yeah, we can get some exercise in for today. Raise your hand in the air like you are stretching to break a glass ceiling that you don't even see in the classroom, like you are stretching up to the sky, and you know that what you have to say is absolutely worthwhile, and everyone should hear it. Your question isn't stupid. Other people are wondering the exact same thing. Every time we let our sentences trail off and end in question marks instead of periods, we need to swoop in there like our own Prince Charmings and finish strong. And every time we say, I wouldn't call myself a feminist, even though we know that we believe in political and social and economic equality, we need to go back in there and stop being scared. We need to stop being scared of this F word. In Iowa, during the Republican primaries, there was this pledge going around asking candidates to affirm their family values. I wonder why there hasn't been a pledge going around in campaigns or in Congress asking people, candidates, Congresspeople, to assert how feminist they are, how much they believe in equal rights for women. If we all take the step of affirming the importance of feminism, it will have a huge impact. The people who will ultimately be able to make the most change, the people who need to speak up right now are you, young people. We need to make sure that today's boys and girls know as much about the lives of people like Susan B. Anthony and Gloria Steinem as they do about Kim Kardashian or Snooki.
Thank you. Thank you.
My sister and I turned on the TV a couple days ago, and we noticed that Keeping Up with the Kardashians was on E, and we were like, we've never seen this show. Like, what are we missing out on? So we go to E, we begin watching, and I start thinking, oh God, I can feel my brain. Like, slowly, it begins to hurt. I mean, it was hilarious, but it was also depressing because I realized that the average episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, it was the one where it's the Kim Ye surprise birthday party, by the way, if you were wondering. I realized that this episode easily has more views than a television program about someone who earned women the right to vote, or probably more views than someone who's reading a book about one of my favorite historical characters. So I'm not saying you need to turn off the TV and not watch the Kardashians anymore, but I want you to establish several more images of powerful and important women in your mind, because Kim Kardashian is not the person I want you to be thinking of when you think of the women who are most influential in your life. I want you to think of your moms, I want you to think of your teachers, I want you to think of someday a woman president. These are the people, that's a vision of the United States that I as a teenage girl hope to see. One where equality, respect, and fairness are much more than buzzwords, but words that are embodied each and every day. Yet this vision might seem elusive because talking to my peers, opinion seems to be split. A lot of people that I talk to say, well, feminism is so yesterday, like we don't really need that anymore, I mean I can vote and stuff. The thing is that the battle didn't end in 1920 when we got the right to vote, and the battle didn't end when we had the right to get equal pay. The battle keeps going because not all of our fights are won. And you know this. As we talked about earlier, when you turn on the TV or when you walk down the street and you see things that aren't right or you hear things that aren't right. So we need to make sure that we keep fighting. Society has, in many ways, conditioned us to think that, yeah, feminism is over, that we are in a pretty good spot right now. There are many artificial constructions of token girl power, yet there's all this segregation in the toy aisle where the girls' toys are pink and they're about cooking or fashion or a very limited set of things, and the guys' toys are black and blue and they're construction and cars. And I know girls who are in construction and cars, and I know guys who would love to dress up dolls and cook. You probably have friends like that too. The media we consume, the merchandise we're offered, it's all limited oftentimes based on gender. If you wander down to the magazine section and you start looking at the magazines that are available for teen girls, you see Cosmo Girl, 17, Vogue, Girls Life. Try looking for how many articles there are about appearance versus how many articles there are about thinking, about ideas. And you'll see that there are far more how to get flat abs and 476 ways to be irresistible and how to apply the perfect smoky mascara. Probably it's like 9 to 1 as far as the proportion. Now you come in this imaginary department store to the clothing and shoes section, and you see high heels that get higher and bras in the juniors rack that are all push-ups. And I remember one time I was waiting for my mom to get out of the fitting room at Target, and I was bored and I was wandering around, and I realized that every single bra was a push-up, even the ones marked sport. And I was like, you kidding me? How are you doing sports with... Okay. High school girls knew what I mean. Whether they were plain black or they were garishly multicolored, every single one was designed to create this image of this perfect woman who had perfect cleavage. I have nothing against padded bras in general, but my immediate thought in that department store was, why are there so many? Why do teenage girls need so many? The issue of over-sexualizing girls from a young age came to the forefront, I remember, with this young 10-year-old model in France named Lena Rose Blondeau. And she was posed in all these pictures in Vogue magazine where she was wearing like stiletto heels and tons of makeup, and they basically made her look like a 30-year-old woman. Obviously, people were really disturbed by this. And the question is, should we be so surprised? Because we live in a culture in which there are many, many depictions of girls dressed in ways that are obviously meant to be appealing to an outside viewer. It's easy to pass off the overwhelming number of G-strings and push-up bras and everything else as the market, that teenagers want to rebel against their parents and dress a certain way. But the truth is that it has so much to do with marketing. It has so much to do with the image that we're sold of the girls that we're supposed to be. It has to do with advertising on storefront posters and in Times Square featuring young models. And so that's how you get to a world where Abercrombie & Fitch markets a padded push-up triangle bra to girls as young as 7. And that to me is incredibly disturbing. That's why we still need feminism. America oftentimes sends girls a mixed message where we're told to love who we are, and on the other hand sold an immense catalog of products to be something completely different. We're told that good girls don't show too much skin or go after boys, and then we're sold boyfriend push-ups, lacy thumbs, or magazines that have so many cover stories on how to be irresistible. The idea that a girl's sexuality is only for someone else to enjoy, the idea that a girl's appearance is only for someone else to look at and find beautiful is ridiculous. Our bodies are our own, and we have to be the ones who decide what to do with them. I don't want those decisions to be affected negatively by the countless false images of physical perfection, whether on store aisles or storefront ads, magazine covers, or TV shows there are. Because what the unsaid message of all those beautiful supermodels who look exactly alike and all those push-up bras and everything else is that no matter what size you are, it isn't good enough. No matter what size you are, it isn't good enough. That is the message I heard when I was 5 years old and I played with dolls who had feet so high that if they existed in real life, she could not stand. Yeah, any people who played with Barbie here? You know what I'm talking about? A waist so small that anatomically it could not possibly exist. I heard that message as a teenager reading magazines marketed to girls that value beauty more than brains. Let's face it, it's true. And I see that message in clothes I won't fit, that sell too much on the basis of less and more is more, especially if that less is lacy and pink. I don't think the women I look up to got to where they are because they looked like Barbie or they dressed really prettily. I think it took smarts and persistence and hard work. And these aren't the traits that are emphasized right now on store shelves and on magazine covers. It isn't the thing that is represented strongly on the TV shows that are most popular that feature women either. We see the exploits of the real housewives of whatever city, and all they're doing is catfighting and getting their nails done, and women are so much more than that. On Jersey Shore, Snooki getting drunk and getting into fights. And I hope that she will never be an influence in government and policy, but Snooki easily has more name recognition than someone like Valerie Jarrett, senior advisor to the president. To the parents in the room, I would question who you would want your daughters looking up to. One depressing thing is that even when women become powerful for reasons completely unrelated to appearance, many people go out of their way to harp on appearance. For instance, Representative Jim Sensenbrenner discouraged Michelle Obama's healthy eating campaign by saying, quote, "She has a large posterior herself," end quote. Is that an appropriate comment to make about anyone? No. And what's crazy is that this guy didn't resign, this guy didn't apologize. It was just like, oh, you know, sex is common. Hillary Clinton once said, quote, "If I want to knock a story off the front page, I just change my hairstyle." And here in Southern California, we're in the neighborhood of paparazzi who, if someone changes weight even a minute amount, will plaster their photo on the front page, put a big circle around it and say baby bump. I would hate to be someone, whether a politician or an actress or anyone else, who has to step out the door and find myself evaluated not on what I say or how I act, but what I'm wearing and what my hair looks like. Because quite honestly, I don't brush my hair every single morning. And I don't want that to keep me from the important things in life, from earning someone's respect, from the rest. Okay, I brushed it, I just don't, you know. So, if there is any silver lining to growing up in an environment that tells us that we have to be perfect, that our nails have to look a certain way, that our hair has to be completely gelled up and smooth, that we have to not smear our lipstick and whatever else, if there is any silver lining to growing up in an environment that is so appearance-focused, it's this. We should know how to make something look good. But instead of lipstick or foundation on our skin, we can use feminism to give society a makeover. Girls in high school, just like you, are taking action. 3 girls, Emma Axelrod, Sammy Siegel, and Alina Sembris, successfully pushed for a female moderator in the presidential debates. They used a change.org petition and they managed to get hundreds of thousands of signatures. And media activists, looking at stock images of women on sites like Corvus and Getty Images, where they have photography that anyone can buy, pointed out that women were often represented in the same ways. They were doing domestic work, or they were subordinate to men, or they were laughing alone with salad, which is actually the name of a Tumblr based on that. So they set out to tell the stories of more women. They created a collection, the Lean In collection on Getty Images, that showed women who were skateboarders and runners and mothers and veterans doing all the many diverse things that women can do. And there is also a website called nameitchangeit.org that allows anyone to call out sexism in the media so that people who say really dumb sexist things can feel bad about it because they will receive thousands of emails. If you're the kind of person like me who looks at a TV screen and yells, "That's really sexist," every so often, then you finally have a place to go. The kind of action that changes things, that brings in female moderators of presidential debates, or new collections of stock photography to change the images we have of women, it is grassroots, it's effective, and it's needed. Because what we do when we stay silent, when we quiet down, when we shrink into our seats, when we wait for a Prince Charming to rescue us, is we fall into a trap of the idea that someone else will come along and do the heavy lifting to rescue us. But that never happens. The people who save themselves are the people who have to. When you look at all successful movements in history, the people who fight the hardest, the people who protest the loudest, the people who hold up the biggest signs and stay up the latest are the people who care the most because they are directly affected. So we have to fight for ourselves and speak up and use media to amplify our voices. Progress doesn't work the way of fairy tales. Progress is a story we ourselves get to write, and that is what makes it so much more exciting than Cinderella and Snow White. There are girls who aren't waiting to write this story. They're taking action now. And in some parts of the world, that means getting injured and even risking death. 14-year-old Malala Yousafzai, an activist for girls' education in Pakistan, who some of you might have heard of, the United Nations declared Malala Day internationally. She was shot and grievously injured by the Taliban because she dared to advocate for girls' education. She dared to say that girls like her deserved to learn how to read and write and do math and go to school. But what is uplifting in her story, aside from the tremendous bravery of one girl, is the solidarity of her community. Men, women, and children alike condemned what her attackers had done. And one girl from Malala's hometown said, "For every girl they try to silence, there will be thousands of us angry and ready to speak up." So the question I have for you is this: are we angry? Yes, we are. Are we ready to speak up? Yes, we are. Today, together, let's dare to say the F word, feminism. Are you a feminist? I am. Thank you. History do I admire most and why? Ooh, that is a hard question. I'd have to say Eleanor Roosevelt. When I was a really young kid, I actually had this big biography of her, and I read about how she went from being a very sheltered young woman who was sick often in her childhood and basically just resided among the upper class in New York City to being someone who went out into when she was a young woman, she went into volunteering into really gritty urban streets that her friends said, "Whoa, we don't go there, like we just do volunteering to look good," and she was actually very much committed. And throughout her husband's presidency, really being a woman who wasn't afraid to advocate for what she believed was right. So yeah, definitely classic. And also, not exactly American history, but I come from Seattle, and Seattle just elected the first socialist city council member in the nation, and while my politics might not exactly align all the time, Shama Swan is a really incredible woman for the fact that she dared to go up and say, "Yeah, I have politics that everyone has heard kind of negative things about, but here's my platform, go for me anyway." Which is pretty incredible. Any other questions? Yes?
Where are you going to go to college?
I do not know yet. I'm sorry, the closest I would get would be, I applied to Berkeley, but that's like pretty far. Yeah, I applied to like 12 schools, so I hear back in late March, fingers crossed. And one more question? Oh, yes.
What are you planning to do? Like, your major?
I'm really interested in political science. I also love education and philosophy, but mainly I'm interested in politics. Actually, a quick shout out. Y'all likely know this, but the number of women in the House of Representatives and the Senate is pitifully tiny. Women are like 51% of the population, 50%. And yet we only make up this tiny number. We are the most underrepresented group. We're not even a minority, like we are literally half, and yet we are not half in our nation's government. So STEM is, go into STEM, but go into politics too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate